Welcome back or welcome to, this is an intro I stole from somewhere else, but it's okay because our discussion today is all about awareness and mindfulness. As always, I'm Gunnar and my co-host here is, take it away,
Andrew Swasey. So, want me to elaborate on that? Sorry.
No, you're doing great. And the more episodes that we record, the easier it gets to feel comfortable. And that reminds me of what I teach to my athletes and my clients is when you start to do the reps, you can build confidence, and then you can start to see that confidence grow in other places. And that's a perfect segue into awareness and mindfulness. So we've talked on different topics and we've touched on what it means to be aware of those different topics. Now, today, we're actually going to talk about what is awareness, how do we use it, what is mindfulness, and how do we use it? How do we practice it? All of these different things. I'm going to kick this off and asking Andrew a question. What is the difference between awareness and mindfulness, in your opinion?
When I was thinking about this question, I first came up with my own answer and thought about it in relation to my life and how I teach my clients this as a coach. And then I went and I looked up the Oxford Dictionary, definition of it, because I was curious to see what that definition was versus mine. And I thought there was mostly similarity, but some interesting aspects that were different. So for awareness, I generally defined awareness as placing your attention to something. It could be a thought, emotion, or physical sensation. Awareness, generally speaking, requires attention. When it comes to mindfulness, I look at mindfulness as like awareness plus something, right? And the way I looked at it is awareness is kind of like the ability to exercise discernment. Like when you're aware, when you're aware, and then you let your awareness help guide your actions towards like a specific outcome. So like very generally speaking, I said awareness is attention. Mindfulness is attention plus discernment. So when we're aware of something, we now have a new level of information about person, place, thing, situation, whatever it might be. Mindfulness is then taking that newfound attention that we have and using it to create an outcome that we want. And we do that through discernment with our, how we live our life and the behaviors and the actions that we take. I was curious to then go and look back at the Oxford Dictionary definition of awareness. And awareness is knowledge or perception of a situation or fact. Okay. And then mindfulness, there was two definitions to it that I thought were applicable. The first one was the state of being conscious or aware of something is mindfulness. And then it also elaborated a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment. And both I really like the dictionary definitions of as well. But when I like distilled it down for what was simple and easy for me to understand, awareness is attention to some person, place, or thing, or thought, emotion. Mindfulness is attention plus discernment. You're using that new level of awareness to then make a decision or not make a decision about some specific, whatever the situation applies to.
I like that. So when you were in the process of creating these definitions, because we talked about these questions earlier in the week, how did you find this to be an easy answer to come up with? And where did it challenge you? What was the easy part about writing these definitions? What was the challenge in writing the definitions?
The easy part was just writing and just like awareness. I wrote all the things that came to mind with awareness. I wrote down all the things that came to mind with mindfulness. And there was a lot more that I wrote down that I did not elaborate on within the definitions. So that was like the easy part, because I made the space to go out, take about an hour or so to think about these things and do it in a place where I could really put a lot of thought into it. The hard part was distilling it down into something as simple as attention and attention plus discernment. It's, there's so much nuance in life and things. Distilling things down can take away from the essence of something that you're trying to explain. But I felt that attention and attention plus discernment were, because these are words and language that we've used in podcasts and conversations before, were really an effective way to communicate awareness and mindfulness, and how we would use that in a coaching situation or everyday life for ourselves. So that was the easy part, and that was the hard part.
I love it. What I'm noticing as a similarity for me is mindfulness takes awareness. You need to have awareness of something to then be mindful. And my way of answering that question of, how do you practice mindfulness, or how do you see mindfulness in action, is simplifying the situation by recognizing, bringing awareness to your emotions, to the environment context, the social context. Maybe you're coming off of a really light week, so you're making decisions differently. When you can become aware of what is going into where you are in that moment, mindfulness lives in that space. So when I think about awareness is taking in information and taking it in such a way that is non-judgmental. And when I can see things simplified, I can then move forward, right? That space that I'm creating between reaction of, if something hit, like, let's say I get poked in the arm when I'm out for a run by a tree, I'm going to react and get out of the way. My reaction could also be to go back and fight the tree, as absurd as that is. However, awareness is, oh, the tree poked me, I can move on. I'm no longer in pain. I'm not bleeding. I'm taking in that context, and then mindfully I can move on, saying that's in the past. It's no longer an issue for me. Keep my eyes on the road.
And you can be mindful of future trees that you run by.
Exactly. So this conversation of awareness and mindfulness, we're touching on the same thing, right? We as an individual can be aware of infinite things, and that can pull us out of ourself. That can pull us away from like what we truly want. Mindfulness is the discernment, to use your word there, of what's important to me and what am I aware of right now. How do I break that up, and how do I stay mindful of my words, my thoughts, my actions? And I mean, those are simplified generalities, but my words, thoughts, and actions can be mindful, or they can be out of mind. And oftentimes we get into trouble if we're out of our mind. We help ourselves out when we are mindful.
Well, I think the things that we are thoughts, minds, and actions, right? So we want to be mindful of those, so we're putting ourselves, our best selves forward too, and our most authentic selves too.
Definitely. In our previous conversation about this podcast, we came up with a couple questions, and this is an infinite question, which is great because that is an important thing. We as individuals have infinite potential, which means our self-worth is also infinite. Right? The limits we put on ourselves can distract from what's really important to us, what we want, what our goals are, what we're doing in the moment to get to our goals. And then we can be harsh on ourselves. So I also see mindfulness as a way to discern of how am I taking care of myself? How am I investing in myself in this moment that may help me in the future? Right. And as a way to practice, this is the question. How do you practice mindfulness? This is to you.
So I wrote down a list of things that I felt were practices that could be thrown into the bucket of mindfulness. And they are what I would call meditative practices as well. But things that come to mind, like when I reflected back on the past week, walking, intentional movement or exercise, adventuring, exploring, going somewhere new, trying something different, surfing, hiking, placing my focus on my breath, journaling, yoga, unplugging, meaning like stepping away from technology and just being one with everything that's going on in that specific moment. So all those are practices that I use to work on mindfulness, although sometimes they're not even done with the intention of being mindful. They're just things that I enjoy. Surfing to be the most obvious example. When I first learned how to surf, it was a novel, new experience for me. I love the kinesthetic experience of moving my body in space and moving it in new ways in space. And when I'm so engulfed and focused on that activity in of itself, it's like meditation for me, because that's all that matters right there in that present moment. Is what I'm doing is surfing right then and there. Like, how's my paddle? Where's the wave coming? Where's the swell direction? Can I paddle into it? All these things at first are like in my conscious mind, and then after you develop a level of skill associated with it, you no longer really have to think about it. You just go into flow, right? And so for me, now surfing is this flow-based activity, and being out in the water, being in nature, seeing the dolphins swim by, seals, no sharks recently, unfortunately. But doing all that just it's just a meditative experience. And that's one way that I practice, I guess you could say practicing mindfulness. But that's really more of like, I would say I'd throw that more into the bucket of meditation more so than anything. But meditation and mindfulness are very much so tied together. I'd be curious, Gunnar, for yourself, what are like some practices that you do for mindfulness?
Yeah, thank you. Your answer is beautiful in the way that I see it show up in my life, and I imagine this is going to be similar to anyone that's listening to this. The way I practice mindfulness is through movement, and you touched on that, right? For me, it's when my physical body is in motion. It's using the energy that I'm conjuring, to, for lack of a better word. Like, I have that energy within me, and when I can direct that, my physical movement is a reflection of my mind, right? I see the possibility. I can see the potential in what I can do. So meditation for me is a physical act that then carries over into more of a spiritual sense. It also has a psychological, empowering way to it. I know I'm getting into the weeds with these words. So for me, it comes down to, all right, that space that I've created by moving my body allows me to then see my thoughts for what they are. And they are thoughts. They are not what defines me. I think this is something we can touch on about athletes in specific, is what we see in our mind may not always be true. And if we can be aware of our thoughts, to use that, right? We're taking in information from ourselves. When we're aware of our thoughts, we can understand, is that me? Is it not me? And make the decision there mindfully to move forward. And the act of practicing, the act of doing the reps, whether that's for your sport, whether that's for physical health, whether that's for learning how to cook, all of those things take information in, being aware of them, and then mindfully moving forward. To go back to the question, how do I practice mindfulness? It's in that physical space. My body is a physical being. The world around me is physical because I'm taking in that information. I imagine cooking is a meditative practice for you, that you gain mindfulness. Is that true for you, Andrew?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, being immersed in the experience of it all, like cooking, you have flavors, you have smells, you have the physical action of preparing the food, the kinesthetic touch of the food itself, when it's before it's cooked, after it's cooked. I imagine I imagine maybe there's one other type of experience in life that's more sensual and immersive than cooking.
Right. And I love what you touched on there. Like we have things that we can name, right? We have smells, we have tastes, we have heat, we have cold, those juxtapositions of our physical body being projected from our mind, right? Our body doesn't necessarily take in the environment. Our mind perceives the environment. And that can go down a huge rabbit hole, which was honestly the hardest class I'd ever taken, was perceptual motor learning. And that is all about how our mind allows our body to function. And I'm going to end this conversation on that. We're going to go back to how we practice and like how cooking shows up. As a coach, how do you help your clients become aware? And then how do you build mindfulness practices for them?
So specifically in the context of my coaching, I work with my clients. I help them get stronger and transform their bodies. They move better. They develop strength. They lose fat when they work with me. The biggest area that people tend to have, that I notice people tend to have lack of awareness in, is their nutrition, right? Their diet. And I just started working with someone this past week, and I told her these initial few weeks going through this process, we're exploring our bodies. We're bringing more awareness to how we move. We're bringing more awareness to our nutrition and our diet, the things that we're fueling our body with. And I asked her to start journaling or logging her food intake and just becoming more aware of what you're eating on a regular basis, rather than saying you need to do this. Like, let's just start off by bringing more attention and awareness to what you're eating on a regular basis. I don't care what it is, just let's start to see what's going in, how you're fueling your body. And so that's like one specific practice that I use. It's as like a coach in the fitness space. I imagine that's a very common one that a lot of people use, although it's something that a lot of people lack mindfulness around, or that at least they think they're doing something correctly, when in reality, the data from the tracking shows otherwise. And then they realize, like, oh, I thought I was eating enough fruits and vegetables per day, but I was only eating 1 serving per day. Now I'm eating 3 to 5 servings of fruits and vegetables today. It's like, awesome. That's a huge win of itself. And I was listening to a podcast, and it made so much sense as like a coach, especially when I'm helping people with nutrition. There's really not a whole lot that you need to tell people to eat and not to eat. Most people generally know what to eat and what not to eat as far as what's being healthy goes.
Yeah. What would you say that's like instinctual?
Yeah, like people generally know that donuts are full of sugar and fat, and they're generally unhealthy, right? Generally speaking, right? not going
Yeah.
to have the nutritional value that say spinach or broccoli has, right? So people know that, right? Although they because they are unaware of how much they eat and like what they eat on a regular basis, and it's just such a part of their daily life. When they look back and see over the past week after logging, they're like, wow, I only ate like a couple of servings of fruits and vegetables throughout the week. This is not good. I need more nutrition in my life. I need to, so I can feel better, right? Some people it's eating too many calories. Some people it's eating too many, but not enough calories. There's nuance within there as far as how that awareness like helps people make the proper changes they need to make for their health and their overall well-being. So that's like the most obvious and specific example that comes to mind in regards to helping my clients practice awareness and implement change around awareness. I'm curious because you work a lot with people specifically on their mindset. Are there specific examples that come to mind for you in your coaching practice?
Yes, absolutely. And the entire goal of my mindset practice and coaching is to bring awareness and then practice mindfulness. And I want to emphasize that it's a practice of mindfulness.
Yes.
You are not born mindful. It is an act, right? Act is inside practice. We have to continue to do it. And that was a free coaching lesson right there on this. So when I think about creating awareness for my clients, it comes down to two things: how we use language to communicate with ourselves first, and then communicate with others. So language is a major piece. Once we become aware of our speech, our writing, our thoughts, because we are talking to ourselves with that language, then we can start to become more mindful of, all right, how do I want to show up in the world around me? Whether you're an athlete going after a specific sporting goal, whether you're thinking about your business and wanting to find a new way to go about things. Right. First, we have to become aware of our language. Go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify. So you're saying that awareness starts with language, how you speak to yourself and other people. Like that's the foundation of awareness.
I agree with that. Yes.
Okay. I was just reiterating what I thought you said.
Yeah. And spot on. Like when you're noticing me right now, carefully picking out my words, and there's intentional pausing to allow myself to think. I'm aware that there are times that I can talk really quickly about a subject that I'm passionate about. I may or may not say something that I don't actually mean to say, or I'm not giving enough context to. There is where mindfulness comes in. So for this conversation right now, I'm aware that I'm taking my time. I'm choosing my words specifically for this conversation so that it's understandable. And for me, that's being mindful of, who am I talking to? Right now, I'm talking to you, Andrew, and anyone that's listening. When I'm riding my bike and I'm by myself and I'm pushing myself to exert, I'm talking to myself. I'm aware of my words internally. All right, this hurts, or I'm not going to finish the way I want to. I can be aware of that and then be translating as quick as I can because I've practiced mindfulness around my language. I can go from this hurts to immediately translating, that's okay. That's why you're here. Or go ahead.
I'm curious, like how long did it take for you to develop this practice? So where you're at now?
Oh man, isn't that the million? Well, million's not a lot of money anymore, but like $1 trillion question, right? How long did it take me to get to this?
Or was there like a specific instance when you realized like the significance of awareness and mindfulness in your life, and how that moment, like, changed the trajectory to where you're at now?
A few instances, and in reflection on those moments, they were all steps in the same direction, with, let's say, harsher lessons of the same thing. So thinking back to when I was working for a gym, and I was getting just overworked. I was burnt out. I needed help. I asked for help, and it didn't come in a way that was helpful to me. I realized very quickly that all I can control is myself. And as soon as I became aware of that, it became my sole mission to understand how to then become more of myself through mindful practice or meditation, to use that phrase or that term again. So that lesson of, all right, I'm overworked, I'm undervalued, I'm just being strung out and burnt out everywhere. I got to the point where all I had left were my thoughts, and I needed to control those thoughts, because at the very basis, the way I'm talking to myself is the way that I'm going to show up in other places. And I have a high standard of how I coach and how I operate and how I perform as an athlete. It starts with my thoughts, and it continues to build that practice through my thoughts. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
One instance, for sure. Thank you for asking. Yeah. Do you have any questions that you had written down that we haven't touched on yet?
Well, you did talk about it earlier, and I mean, I think of stories of mindfulness and awareness, and how increased. Like, I really like what you said about having responsibility of yourself, or like having control of yourself. And at the end of the day, that's the most important. Like, that realization there, I imagine, helped you take more ownership and control of your life. And you realize, oh wow, like the only thing I have like really ultimate control over is myself. What I tell myself, my thoughts, the words, the language that I use, that's all an outward reflection of what's going on internally, right? And so you can use that as a way to improve your communication, improve how you coach, improve all aspects of your life, right? Something we talked about, and I imagine this is a good direction to take the conversation, because in today's world and society, there's a lot of complicated things going on, right? And we have to exercise discernment and how we live our lives and how we choose and make decisions. Something we talked about beforehand, and I'll ask you this now, is how do you answer complicated questions?
How do I answer complicated questions? Simplify. As difficult as that can be, when I can simplify what is happening around me, what context that question is coming from, and really understanding what it means to me. So if this complicated question is life or death, I'm going to take more time to simplify. And as we were discussing all throughout this conversation, when I am aware of what's going on in my thoughts, what I'm aware of, where this question may be coming from, what the goal of answering this question is, I'm reflecting, or I'm, inflecting this on myself. And that way I can choose my words. I can answer this question with the best version of myself. So how do I answer complicated questions? become aware of your thoughts, surroundings, any contextual information. Continue to simplify where this, complicated question is trying to go, and then speak from my best self.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, it's negation acknowledged. It's not a reaction.
Beautiful.
There's a lot of intention behind a response to a complicated question. You take those kind of questions seriously, from what it sounds like.
For sure. To pass this back to you, one way that I've found mindfulness, the practice of mindfulness, to really grow for me is beginning to understand what words actually mean. And a word that I want to break down here is mindfulness, right? It's not mindlessness, because that would mean I'm without my mind. I'm less of my mind. I can't answer things mindlessly, or excuse me, I can answer things mindlessly and expect a mindless return. Or I can say things mindlessly and get nothing back. Or something that I don't want back, right? That can be the possibility too. So when we think about the definition, mindfulness, it is being fully present, non-judgmental of yourself, right? Because we are our physical bodies, yet we would not know our physical bodies without our mind. And when we invest in that fully of our own mind, we can be our best selves. I imagine there's some words that are popping up for you. I'm curious if there's a specific word, or maybe it's a phrase that has changed or developed meaning for you in the past months, years, whatever that timeline is. This is on the spot too.
Oh, the first word that comes to mind, and this is one that has come up through our conversations repeatedly, and it's from you, Gunnar. It's discernment. I mean, I knew what discernment meant prior to our conversations, although the process of discernment, the mindfulness around actively discerning and making better decisions, I became more aware of that over the past couple of months, and it's helped me create a framework in my mind for how to manage my thoughts, my experiences, especially when it comes to answering complicated questions. The word discernment, comes up in my simplified form of mindfulness, attention plus discernment, right? And when you answer mindful questions, when you answer complicated questions, you want to be mindful of all aspects of the situation, right? We live in an amazingly complicated world, and when it comes to complicated questions, making that space to think things through, to exercise discernment, is an important aspect. And I imagine a lot of people are programmed in today's world and society for instant gratification, and making space and time to make a decision is something that people are unaware of. They think that everything has to be instant. You have to respond right away. You get an email, you need to respond right away. You get a text, you need to respond right away. You get a phone call, you need to pick up right now. All these things going on. Whereas if you make that space, you can exercise discernment and make a decision that's not only best for you, but for everyone involved as well. And there was an example that came to mind. It just slipped my mind. It'll come back to me, I imagine. But that's my thought around answering complicated questions, like making space, being aware of your visceral emotional reactions, and choosing to keep those to yourself, or be aware that whatever initially comes to mind or whatever it might be might need some distilling and working through and making time. I remember what I was going to say. So I work with a coach as well. And I believe coaches should work with coaches because we should practice what we preach. And in that process of deciding whether or not I was going to work with this coach, I chose, because I knew I wanted to work with the coach and I was really interested in this coach. And there was no reason for me, apparently, to not pull the cord and to go in on it. But I have been working on making better decisions in my life, exercising more discernment, practicing mindfulness and awareness, right? Everything we're talking about right now. And I chose to sleep on it. Not because, negation acknowledged, not because I didn't want to, but because I wanted to. And I wanted to give myself the space to wake up in a different state of mind, in a different state of being, and come back to that same question again. Do I want to sign up for this coaching? Is there anything that has come up since I was last talking to this person that is now here and impacting my decision to move forward and invest in this process? Because it's a big investment. And I did that for 2 days. And every morning I woke up and I felt more aligned with the process of working with a coach than I had been the day before. And my gut was telling me it was the right decision to make. And so I chose to follow my gut. And there was only affirming reasons to sign up for this coach. And so far I'm glad I have. And that was like a process where it was, I would call it a simple decision at the end of the day, because it's either yes or no, but there was like complication to it. And was that decision going to be okay with my lifestyle? Was it or the right financial decision to make in my life right now? Or do I have the time to invest in this coaching process? Because all like the emotions and the excitement in me wanted to say, yes, let's go, let's get started. Although I chose to step back and make space, just make the space before I committed myself to something as big as that. So that was my story.
To go back to you making the final decision to work with a coach, this is an important thing to recognize here or be aware of, is you as an individual, and I'm talking to myself, I'm talking to you, Andrew, I'm talking to anyone listening. You can have permission to do anything you want. I want to give you permission to practice discernment, to be aware of all of these things, and then make a mindful decision on how you're going to speak, act, and think. No particular order on those three, right? As soon as I gave myself permission to ask for help, to get out of the burnt out place that I was when I was coaching in a gym, everything opened up. And it starts with you, the individual. It starts with me when I make that decision. And as a science nerd and understanding genetics and how things get passed down, one thing you and I have touched on in other conversation is, as soon as we become mindful of what we are doing, who we are, and where we want to go, we can literally change the way our body functions from a genetic level, and we can then pass that on. So what you were talking about in a book, it didn't start with you, right? Who's the author on that?
Mark Wolin.
So this concept that we are carrying things that started somewhere else with someone else that is connected to us in a way of genetics, in a way of family history, family experience, family trauma, whatever word you want to put on that. We are connected to something else. As soon as we get to a place where we are aware of what's going on around us and what our thoughts are, we can then mindfully change the direction of our life, right? I want to be the first person for you, Andrew. I want to be the first person that gives someone else permission to make a mindful decision. I hold nothing for that decision because it's perfectly someone else's, perfectly for that individual, perfectly for you if you're listening. You have permission to do anything you want, right? If you're feeling held back by something, take in the context. What is actually happening? Do you want this, or do you feel like you need this? Are you being held back because of something out of your control? Well, what is in your control? Practice discernment, see it clearly, take that time, as you were speaking so wonderfully on, right? When you give yourself that permission to, all right, I really want this, I'm going to think about it. I'm going to give myself my best to go into this next place, right? That is mindfulness in a practice, right? Going back to that, we're always in practice. It starts with your awareness. You can discern what you're aware of, and then you're mindful going forward, right? We have permission from that point to act, think, speak from your best. And I think that's where mindfulness begins and should continue to go, is from your best. What are you mindful of, and how are you practicing that?
Yeah, that's interesting. That makes me think about coaching clients and how we meet people where we're at. And you got to meet yourself where you're at in regards to being mindful, the understanding with yourself, and know that, like you said, it's a practice and it takes time, and realize that perfection is irrelevant. Really, what's most important is that you're just continually practicing. You can't win the game if you take yourself out of it. And when you choose to no longer be mindful and aware of these things, then you're no longer playing the game. But if you continue to practice and be aware of it, you stay in that game, and it becomes a lifelong process, a lifelong practice, more so.
Absolutely. And this this whole discussion is awesome. And I hope if you're listening to this, because I'm experiencing this currently, is having this discussion is a practice of mindfulness. We're constantly thinking about, all right, how do we want to paint this picture for you? How do we want to show our discernment in our words and our actions and our thoughts? And I got two quotes that I would love to share before I pass it back to you. So the first quote is from Joseph Campbell, and it goes, "This, I believe, is the great Western truth, that each of us is a completely unique creature, and that if we are ever to give any gift to the world, it will have to come out of our own experience and fulfillment of our own potentialities, not someone else's."
I like that. I like that a lot.
The second quote fits itself really well into that. And it's by a mindfulness master, we'll say. And I intentionally use that word here, a mindfulness master. His name is Thich Nhat Hanh, and he is a meditation practitioner and teacher. And his quote is, "Life is available only in the present moment." And to finish this off here, mindfulness is the present moment. When we are mindless, we're thinking about the past, we're worried about it, we're thinking about the future, and we're concerned what might happen, right? Life is only available in the present moment, and we get there through mindfulness.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Gunnar.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Andrew. This has been another awesome time talking through these big topics and how they relate to us as individuals, and then how we want to coach. Where can people find your stuff? Where can we keep this message going, maybe on that individual plane of coaching?
Like, how can people find this stuff as far as like through us or other resources or both?
Yeah, you caught me. How can people get connected with you?
Okay. Best way to get connected is through Instagram, Swasey_fitness. Although I am not one to post much, I do interact through the DMs more so as of recently. And I am slowly building up my Instagram volume to a sufficient level that contributes to other aspects of my life. So Swasey_fitness, shoot me a DM, please. How about you?
Well, I just want to touch on this. You are in San Diego.
Yes.
So if you want to even just come by your studio, if you can find it. Where in San Diego?
I'm located in North PB, Bird Rock area of San Diego, California, a couple blocks away from the beach. Yeah, feel free to drop by. You'll see my studio. It has my name on the outside. So
beautiful. Yeah, if you want to get connected with some intentional, discerning fitness, Andrew's your guy. Yeah, awesome. I always appreciate these conversations. If you want to get connected with me, same function. Instagram is going to be the best way. Instagram is at Animus Coach, one word, Animus, ANIMUS Coach. And yeah, I'm working with athletes. I want to create a next generation of athletes that are mindful of why they're performing, why they play their sport, and how that impacts who they are outside of sport, right? So we're going to focus on a lot of this mindset practices of awareness, mindfulness, discernment, and put that into practice that is going to be jet fuel for you in your sport, right? We want to launch some rockets into the next levels of life. So thank you guys. We'll catch you next time. Cue the outro music, which we haven't selected at this point when we're recording, but you might hear it next. All right. Peace.